So the first tip we're going to talk about is locking on. So normally, if you draw your sword or draw any weapon, the game just allows you to kind of swing freely. And the way that this works is you can, obviously use your mouse to look and swing, but you're not going to swing in the direction that you're looking. You're going to swing in the direction that your character's feet are facing, or if you're moving, like let's say I'm backstrafing here, I'm holding the S key, I'm actually going to turn around and swing in the direction that the keyboard is being pressed. That's something that can be a little bit tricky to get used to, because you circle an enemy, it goes over your left shoulder, you turn and face it and swing, but you're still swinging to the front. So it's not until you actually take that little bit of time to turn, you're going to swing the way your body is facing. And you can change that by pressing the keyboard to turn around, but it can get a little bit tricky. So the first major tip is to use the lock-on functionality. It's really easy to miss the tutorial, so it might not be immediately obvious, but anytime you're front to front with an enemy, if you press tab, you get a little lock-on indicator, and now you're going to circle strafe around them, and all your attacks are going to somewhat hone in on them, no matter what direction or key you're holding. So I can be pressing back, and when I attack, I still attack towards the enemy instead of turning around and missing. So that's really the first big tip, is to use that tab key and lock on. Now in a situation where you're fighting multiple enemies, you can lock on to multiple people. So once you've locked on to one enemy, you can use Q and E to change the target that you're locked onto. So let's go pull a couple of these zombies here, and I'll kind of show you what that looks like in real time. So we'll pull both of these guys, we'll lock on, circle around, and pull that guy towards us. And now if I press Q and E, I can change which targets I'm locked onto. So as I circle strafe, I can change and make myself get locked onto the closest one. If there was a ranged guy in the back and I had a spell, I could quickly shift over and lock onto him, fire off some spells, try to clear him out, and then lock back on to the guys in the front and take him out. So as I circle around and this guy becomes in front, I'll just change the lock onto him. This guy takes the lead, lock onto him. So it just really keeps you facing the enemies that you want to be facing, and lets you kind of more closely dictate the terms of the engagement as far as where your attacks are going. Alright, so the next tip I want to talk about is blocking, parrying, and block percentage. So let's aggro this guy, and by default, if you hold the right mouse button, whatever attack is coming at you, unless it's a special attack, you're going to block it. If you have a shield equipped, you will block 100% of the incoming damage. You can see that right there. Block percentage, 100% on the shield. So all the weapons that you're holding in your inventory will have a block percentage listed. Every time you block, if you notice the stamina bar goes down. It does take stamina to block, just like it takes stamina to dodge. So do keep that in mind, and that is a resource that you share for attacking as well. But yeah, shields will block 100% of incoming damage. Now, if you time it just right, and instead of holding, you tap it, like that, you can parry, which will kind of leave them a little bit more open to counterattack. So that's something you can do. You can hold and passively block incoming damage, or you can tap the right mouse button and do kind of a parry. And if that is successful and you time it correctly, it'll actually intercept the attack and leave them open to counterattack. Now, so that is kind of using shields. If we take a look at, let's say we're dual wielding instead of using a shield. This also has a block percentage. Even if we didn't have that equipped and just had our one-handed sword, that also has a block percentage. You can block with any weapon or combination of weapons that you have equipped. It's just that shields are the only things that block 100%. So let's aggro onto this guy, and I'll show you kind of what that looks like. So the shield blocked 100%. This sword is 35%. So this is only going to intercept 35% of the incoming damage. So you can see it cost us stamina still to block, but I also took a little bit of damage. But it's not as much damage as I would have took if I didn't block. And you can see how much that was versus that. So don't be afraid to use that right mouse button to block, even if you're not using a shield. It'll still decrease the amount of damage that you're taking. And same thing, even if you don't have a shield, you can still tap that right mouse button to parry incoming attacks. So that is blocking, parrying, and block percentage. Very, very important. If you don't want to use the stamina to dodge, or if you're in a dungeon and you're surrounded by traps, or if there's multiple enemies and you don't want to dodge into something that's going to hurt you, or you can't dodge for whatever reason, definitely use the block to lessen the damage that you're about to take. If you're wielding a shield, you can absorb all the damage. If you have any other weapon, you can at least mitigate some of it by blocking. Alright, so the next tip I want to talk about is light attacks, heavy attacks, attack combos, and kind of how you can use both of those things in the combat. So let's go ahead and aggro this guy, get him coming towards us. So I've got a club out, I've got a blunt weapon out. So light attack is just left click by default. And you can do 1, 2, 3, 4. Every weapon has a 4-hit combo that ends with kind of a finisher that provides a status effect. For edged weapons, it's a bleed. For blunt weapons, it's a stun. 2, 3, that's going to kill him, so we don't get to see the stun. But yeah, so that's your basic attack. Your light attack is just on left click. If you hold shift instead, you'll actually do a heavy attack combo, because shift left click is your heavy attack. It's going to take a little bit more stamina. It's going to be slower to execute, but it is going to do more damage. And the heavy attacks have a chance to cause that combo finisher status effect just all by themselves. So let's go take a look at that, and I can actually show you on this skeleton up here what this looks like. So 1, 2, 3, 4, kill him, aggro the skeleton. So with the skeleton aggroed, if we go 1, 2, 3, 4, you're going to see that stun. So that's the blunt weapon stun. That will happen with the blunt weapon. If I had an edged weapon, that would have been a bleed instead of a stun. Now again, the heavy attack, hold shift and do the same thing. And you can see the animations are slower, a little bit different, but they're a little bit more powerful. And when I hit with a heavy attack with a blunt weapon, it causes a little bit of that knockback, so it's a little bit more CC for you. Now the really, really cool thing that you can do is mix and match light and heavy attacks in the same combo. So, for example, if I come over here real fast, pay attention, I can go 1, 2, 3, 4 with the light attack, and it's an overhead smash, but it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's kind of that spin move finisher. So if I really needed like an AoE kind of stun instead of a single target stun at the end, if I was surrounded, I could go 1, 2, 3, and then heavy attack finish off of 3 light attacks. Or you can open up with a heavy attack to stagger, and then follow up with faster light attacks against a single target. Or you could go light, heavy, or heavy, light, heavy, or any combination that you want. So definitely, play with the intermix of light and heavy attacks or what the situation calls for. Let's go ahead and use an edged weapon here, just so we can kind of see what this bleed looks like if I can get past this guy's shield. I aggroed a spider. Alright, here we go. So those are all heavy attacks. Dispatch that spider pretty fast. light, light, heavy, heavy. So that's one thing to keep in mind with the one-handed weapons, at least. The heavy finishers, that spin move, it doesn't have quite the same range as just the light attacks, where it's going to be that step forward on the third and the kind of stab on the fourth, especially with the sword. That light attack, 2, 3, 4, stab really gives you a little bit of extra range, whereas finishing it with the spin move, you kind of stay in place, and it's more of a, you're going to hit everything around you, but you're not going to get that range. So if they're staggered, or if you're, kiting backwards, you might end up missing on that fourth attack with that. But yeah, so that is light attack, that is heavy attack, that is combo, and the difference between them. So now the last tip that I want to talk about in this video, and probably the most important tip, is actually going to be bow pulling. Let me go dispatch this guy real fast, just so I can show you this. So this happens quite a lot. You come to a spot, either it's a room in an enclosed dungeon, or a little valley like this in an outdoor dungeon, and you kind of get to a crest, or you get to a doorway, and you look in and you see just a ton of enemies down there. Now, if you're really skilled and you've got a lot of talents and you've got really good gear, and you're not in a hard dungeon, then yeah, sure, you could probably run down there and just mix it up with everybody and use your AoE attacks and use your talents and use your blocking and kind of take everything out. But if you're not as well geared, or if you're playing on a little bit harder difficulty, that's a risky proposition. And in a game like this, where death does carry a pretty significant consequence as far as losing all your gear that isn't soulbound, what you're really going to want to do is use your bow. So let me just take this guy out real fast, and I can kind of show you what this looks like. So the way that the aggro system works is that every enemy has a certain radius around them, that if you break that threshold, they will immediately aggro you. They also have a second kind of sight cone that extends a little bit farther than the kind of passive perception radius that's a circle around them. So if they're looking at you, they can kind of detect you, and they'll aggro onto you for a little bit longer. But the way the bow works is if you hit somebody with the bow, they will aggro you from whatever distance. So, I mean, if I hit that spider up there, it would lock onto me, it would see me, it would start to come towards me to try to attack me. But, so say for example, in a situation like this, I've got these 3 guys down here. If I shoot one of them, he's going to notice me and aggro onto me, but I'm still far enough away that I'm outside of like the passive perception of the other 2, and outside of the vision cone of the other 2 if they happen to look at me. So in this situation, I can just shoot this guy. He's going to aggro onto me, and I can wait for him to run at me, and then take him on by himself, rather than fighting him with his 2 buddies over there. So that is really, I think, the biggest use of the bow. I mean, there are certain talents, obviously, and if you want to play an archer, you can get really powerful and do a lot of damage outright with the bow. But no matter what character class you're playing, even if you're using 2-handed weapons, even if you're a mage, I mean, you can kind of do the same thing with spells, but that'll use your mana, and sometimes, they'll miss, or sometimes they'll get tricky. But with the bow, you have an unlimited amount of arrows. So yeah, just pick the one guy that you want to be fighting, hit him with an arrow, and aggro him, and his buddies will be none the wiser, and then you can kind of take the enemies on one at a time. Now you'll see that guy popped up, his health bar popped up, because this guy was close enough to him that when I hit this guy, it alerted him, but he couldn't find me because I'm still outside of his detection radius. So that's kind of how that works. So let's do that one more time with these 3 guys. If I ran in there, so this guy just turned around. I was inside his vision, so he saw me, so he aggroed onto me. So we'll take him out real fast. So if I walk down there, I'm going to have to take on all 3 of these guys at once. Where if I back up a little bit to where I'm going to be outside of their vision range, and I want to take big guy on first. So I'll just tap him with 1 arrow. He'll immediately aggro onto me from whatever distance I hit him at, and he'll immediately start running towards me. And so now I can go ahead and switch out to my sword and shield. We can lock on, and we can take this guy out without having to worry about his buddies at all. This is probably the single most powerful technique for making sure you stay alive in this game. So we can do that one more time. We'll go ahead and aggro the second guy, and he'll aggro onto me. Now, with these zombies, they're super slow, so a bow is even extra useful because you can just pepper these guys with arrows. As they make their way towards you, they're not going to take cover. They're not going to try to dodge or anything. So it's really easy to take zombies out with the bow. But there's that guy, and then, okay, now we can take the third guy out, if I don't miss. And he's moving. There we go. All right, so now he's going to aggro onto me. And now he'll start stumbling towards me. But that is how you kind of turn a 3 versus 1 engagement, where if I ran down there, I have to fight all 3 of them at the same time, into 3 separate one-on-ones, which are much more manageable. So, just to recap, first we have lock-on, so pressing the tab button will lock on to enemies. You can shift your lock-on between enemies with Q and E. Next we have blocking and block percentage. If you hold down the right mouse button, you will block with whatever weapon you're holding. If you have a shield, it'll block 100% of damage. Any other weapon will be dependent on what its block percentage is. I've noticed it's usually either 35% or 65%. So between 1/3 and 2/3 of damage blocked. Next is heavy and light attacks. Left mouse button is a light attack. Shift left mouse button is a heavy attack. Every weapon has a 4-hit combo, both a light combo and an all-heavy combo. I don't have enough stamina for the heavy combo with a 2-handed weapon here, but you can shift mid-combo between light and heavy attacks. So you could go 3 light and a heavy, or 3 heavy and a light, or any mishmash in between. So play around with that. And then last but not least is definitely using the bow to pull mobs. So that is, once again, kind of exploiting the engagement range of enemies to use the bow at long distances to pick off, or not to pull one enemy towards you at a time, so that you only have to fight one enemy at a time instead of rushing in and getting surrounded and then dying. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it helps you out as you are running some dungeons, and I hope you are able to stay alive and not lose all of your hard-earned loot. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you next time.